The Torus Run by Harry Buck. Chapter 2. Twins, Part 1. The robo-taxi slid noiselessly down Highway 101 toward Stash's home in Mountain View. By the time he'd passed the airport, his head was throbbing. By Palo Alto, his adrenaline level was in free fall, and he gave up any hope of toughing out the pain. "Hey, car," he mumbled. "New destination. Take me to Stanford Medical Center." The robo-taxi chimed to acknowledge the change and exited the highway, heading for the emergency room. Shortly after, Stash stood under the harsh lights of the ER, his jacket wadded up to staunch the flow of blood from his flattened nose. The nurse took one look and waved him in. "Oh, come on, sweetie. You're gonna need a lie down while we patch up that mess." She took him by the hand, leading him through the sterile hallway to the brightly lit procedure room. It turned out this was a good night to get beaten up. He'd barely settled on the bed by the time the doctor opened the door. "Oh my," she said, leaning in to inspect the damage. "I'm going to have to do quite a bit of work on that. You'll need to be anesthetized. Do you want a general or a local?" He craned his neck to look at her. She was tilting her head from side to side, eyeing his nose the way a carpenter looked at a crooked piece of wood. "I think the general." She nodded. "Good call." Minutes later, Stash was prepped and lying down on the procedure table. He barely noticed the needle going in, and as the drugs took control, he felt himself slipping back in time to the fateful meeting with his boss, 5 years earlier. That had led him to this moment. Stash gulped down the last of his lunch and looked across the table at Dan Jackson. Dan, the boy wonder, the charmer of venture capitalists and DC lawmakers alike. Dan, his college roommate, his CEO, and today, his quarry. "I need to talk to you about an idea," Stash began, his voice taking on a soothing, persuasive tone as he settled his elbows on the table and steepled his fingers together. Dan swatted at his hands. "Don't try your Zen voodoo on me. I don't fall for it anymore. And no to whatever you were going to ask." Stash smiled and lowered his arms. "I want to start working on twins." "Oh, hell no," Dan said. "We need to make some money before they shut us down. Can't you just finish the business chatbot?" "Think about it," Stash said. "Nobody wants a generic AI with a static, canned personality. They want a partner, a buddy, a teacher, someone who grows with them. Give them a personal AI, a twin, and they'll wear it around the clock and pay you for the privilege. Freedom will get a tsunami of data. We can ride that all the way to AGI. Then they'll be able to build us anything." Dan dropped his head, ran his fingers through his thinning blonde hair, and thought for a minute. "Look, I'd go to the wall for you, but the board will flay me if we pivot strategies again. Meet me halfway, all right? Get the biz chat into the market, and we can have a small team chase your twins next year." "Biz chat is on track. I've got the team rocking now," Stash told him. "We'll hit our dates, I promise." Dan's face hardened. "We can't, Stash. We just can't. We need everyone on the team focused on one goal. The engineers can't see their boss chasing a side project." Stash reeled at the comment. He'd always assumed they thought of each other as equals, and that Dan would never actually refuse him. "Look, I don't need anyone's help. Just some time with the lab AI. Well, maybe a lot of time." "Stash, I've decided. The answer is no." "Dan." "Don't make me start threatening you," Dan said, crossing an unspoken line between them. He stared at Stash, waiting for an objection. Stash couldn't think past the roar of blood pulsing in his ears. He reached for his tray and left, stopping by his office only long enough to grab his bike and start the ride home in a rage. Once there, he paced his small apartment, replaying the argument over and over in his head. vacillating between quitting and complying. Unable to come to a decision, he gave up and went to exhaust himself rock climbing at the local gym.